My grandma found a board game called Peter's Place, and we should have paid attention to the rules.
"Oh, I found this at a charity shop on Market Street," she squealed excitably. "It looked like something you two would love."
The rigid cardboard box, far too firm for its apparent age, was marked with a black serif font that read Peter's Place. The cover image depicted a titchy plastic figure, painted purple, striding slowly forwards. A figure seemingly disinterested in the several white plastic figures pursuing it at a far greater pace. And every character powered towards a nearly nondescript house in the distance, little more than a childlike outline of a home. A triangular roof, 4 windows, and a door. The picture contained some indistinguishable shapes of various muted colours. Despite the mint condition of the cardboard, its weathered ink told the truth. There persisted a persuasion, moving towards the forefront of my mind, that the faded cover had lost some of its imagery to time. Lost secrets that, perhaps, would have told us much more about the ancient game. Would have told us, perhaps, never to play it. Grandma proudly placed the game on the coffee table, and I offered my younger sister the Krasinski smirk, as if smugly eyeballing some hidden camera. She stifled laughter behind bubbling lips, and our grandmother obliviously settled into an armchair. It pains me to sound like a brain-rotted adolescent, but Michaela and I haven't ever enjoyed board games, so I wondered why Grandma had presumed otherwise. Still, I felt shameful for thinking that way. I knew better. Around the time I went to university and my sister entered 6th form, the Templeman family adopted a new stilted dynamic. Mum and Dad changed. At first I thought it had something to do with my sister and I embracing new phases of life. However, a few months ago, our parents finally revealed that Grandma was displaying some early signs of vascular dementia. During the holidays, Michaela and I often spent a few days at our grandmother's house, and we'd noticed her cognitive decline over the years. With this new knowledge, of course, we realised it was more serious than that. We realised our time with her was precious and fleeting, so we would have done anything to make her remaining days pleasant. Whether it had been a 3-hour marathon of Antiques Roadshow or an evening of some dull board game.
"What are the rules, Emmett?" Grandma asked me.
I lifted the lid, wincing as it loudly scraped against the sides of the box. For a moment, I almost needed to strain, as if the lid were wrestling with me, as if it were unwilling to reveal what lay beneath. But it eventually came free.
"You need to hit the gym, spaghetti limbs,"
Michaela laughed. I unleashed a backhanded swing, thumping my sister on the nose with the cover of the box, and she recoiled.
"Behave, children,"
Grandma tutted, before her eyes suddenly glazed.
"Where did you get this game? It looks fun."
I sighed, feeling the mood in the room lower. "It was, you bought it for us, Grandma."
"Oh,"
she softly responded, before clearing her throat uncomfortably.
"Yes, that's right. Sorry. So let's start, shall we?"
"I just need to read the rules first," I chuckled.
"And you need to explain them to us, you dirty cheater,"
Michaela added.
"I will,"
I said, rolling my eyes. "I'll repeat them word for word, and you'll spend about 20 minutes reading the entire rulebook just to check I didn't lie to you."
"Sounds about right,"
Michaela nodded.
"Then one of you will have to read them aloud a second time, because I will have forgotten."
Grandma giggled. My sister and I laughed along, but there was a hint of sadness in that moment of joy. Grandma's wit still cut sharply whenever it poked above ground, but that edge had become blunter over the months. It was a side of her, much like all sides of her, that we rarely saw after the diagnosis. Whatever remained of Grandma, in terms of who we knew, was slowly dying. The body, but not the mind, of a loved one lingers before you. There may still be moments of that person you used to know, painful reminders of that gradual deterioration. To fill the pained pause that followed the round of laughter, I explained the rules. Peter's place. The house is home. The place which safeguards all that is dear to you, all that you wish to hold and never let go. You have been displaced, and you must return to your pleasant abode. However, you are not the only one with eyes on that shining beacon in the darkness. Peter has seen that you have woken far from home, and he hungrily eyes this opportunity to take everything you love. You and your teammates, each moving a white piece 1 or 2 squares per turn, must work together to reach the house. At the end of each round, when all players have taken a turn, Peter, depicted by the purple piece, will move 1 square closer to the same destination. You win if every teammate reaches the house before him. You lose if it becomes Peter's place. You may be faster, but he is far more cunning. Peter knows that legs grow weary. The journey will weather you, perhaps even taking everything. Peter, on the other hand, cannot be slowed, cannot be stopped. He moves steadily. Every turn, you will move in whichever direction you so please. There are many possible routes, always the same destination. However, to win, every single player must reach the house before Peter. After moving your piece, you will pick up an item card, adding it to your collection, and a choice card. The cards must correspond with the colour, either red or green, of the square on which you land. If you land on an event square, you must also draw a corresponding event card. If a player reaches the house, item and choice cards do not need to be drawn. However, if all players have crossed the line, draw 1 final event card to determine your victory or failure. It may be red or green. This is no game of chance. You decide the route. Peter is an ambitious man. Peter is an acquisitive man. Peter is, above all else, a self-serving man. To him, a house is not a home. It is food. And he will stop at nothing to take it from you, to take everything from you. Understand that you may win today, but nothing lasts forever. One day, the coarse sands of time will rot your door to the ground. One day, Peter will have his place. When all players are ready, the house will open and the game will begin. Grandma sighed.
Ooh, that was a mighty mouthful.
Yeah, most of it simply set the scene. The rules actually seem quite straightforward, I assured her. I know it's a strategy game, but it'll be easier than chess. Think of it that way, Grandma. You're good at chess. Plus we all have to work together, so we'll help you, Michaela added. And we won't have to worry about Emmett cheating to beat us. What sparked this Emmett is a cheater crusade? I asked, laughing. Monopoly, 2015. Mayfair Gate, my sister bluntly explained. I snorted even louder. I was 10 years old. You put 5 houses on it, Emmett. 5, Michaela barked. The max is 4, and you know it. You knew it then, too. Nobody stopped me. I shrugged, grinning. It's a good life lesson, Michaela. You've got to keep your eye on the ball, you know? Property development is a ruthless game. My sister huffed whilst unpacking the box. She started to unfold a large cardboard square onto the carpet, revealing an entanglement of various cross-junctions and overlapping routes. There were dozens of ways to reach the plain 2-storey house with no discernible features. Some roads passed through a dense woodland, and others passed through an abandoned town. My eyes wandered across different passages. The most direct route to the house squeezed between the woodland and the town. However, I counted a greater number of green than red squares on the tempting route, and something told me that green might bring far worse odds. Peter's place unnerved me for a reason I did not understand. I found myself not wanting to eye the board for a prolonged period of time. What have you got in your hands, Emmett? Grandma asked, waking me from the trance. I'd been so transfixed that I forgot I'd plucked an old cotton bag from the box. I loosened the drawstring to find a dusty heap of plastic figurines at the bottom. 3 white and 1 purple. As I removed them from the bag, hand trembling, my sister laughed. What are the odds? It's as if it were made for us, she said. Something about that sent shivers down my spine, though I internally chastised myself for being frightened by a coincidence. I was trying to make sense of the fear response within my body. Embarrassed that I was growing increasingly afraid of something as banal as a board game. There were starting squares in the bottom corners of the board. One on the far left for the main players, and one on the far right for Peter. I placed the 3 white pieces, who were frozen in sprinting poses, on our starting square, and the purple figurine, frozen in a brisk walking pose, was placed on the opposing square. At Peter's feet, a purple squared route led to the house, circumventing both the woods and the town. No obstacles. No great rush needed. He would creep to the same destination as us, 1 square at a time. We're in a hurry, aren't we? Grandma laughed, picking up one of the white figurines and admiring it. Oh, it's been quite a few years since I was able to run like this. And look at Peter, Michaela said, pointing at the figurine. He's hardly even trying to beat us. Are we ready to start? I asked. Or would we rather watch TV? Oh, the television set will be there in an hour or so, Grandma said. Let's play. Bold of you to think we'll finish that quickly, Michaela said. Who goes first? Given my churning gut, I wanted to refuse, but I knew my grandmother might have very few lucid days left. I realised we had to cherish nights like that one. Soon, she might not be able to play board games at all, I thought. Soon she might not even recognise my face. It doesn't say, I eventually replied. Grandma, do you want to start? We'll go clockwise. You, Michaela, me, then Peter. Sure, Grandma smiled. You'll have to move the piece for me though, darling. It'll hurt my back to keep clambering out of this chair. Of course, I said, lifting one of the white pieces. There came a sharp click from the hallway, startling the three of us, and our eyes shot to the back door, which stood ajar. A moment later, we were all laughing at our skittish reactions.
"Well, I suppose that means the game begins,"
Michaela said.
"Sorry, dearies,"
Grandma apologised.
"That latch has been on the blink for eons."
I'll shut it, I said.
"Oh, don't bother, Emmett. The door will only do it again,"
she called as I bounded into the hallway. I closed the unlatched back entrance, and my eyes were drawn to the patterned glass, which barely allowed any visibility of the field beyond Grandma's cosy back garden. But my gaze met something in the distance, illuminated by the dusky red light of that strange time post-sunset. A being hid in the forest, dark and shapeless, watching me with eyes that could not be seen. Driven by some force beyond me, I opened my mouth to release a soundless scream, terrified and helpless in the face of whatever surveyed me.
"Emmett?"
Michaela shouted from the living room.
"Are we playing or not?"
My lips sharply rejoined, and I controlled my breathing, wondering what I'd just experienced, wondering how to rationally explain it to myself, given that I'd never suffered from any mental illness, given that I'd never believed in anything beyond what could be seen, heard, smelt, or touched. But on that night, I did not doubt that something lurked in the forest. Something with intent neither cruel nor kind. Something that did not feel at all. Which way would you like to move? I asked quietly as I re-entered the room.
"Oh, I don't know,"
Grandma chuckled.
"Towards those lovely trees, perhaps."
I nodded, sitting on the carpet and veiling my emotions, as I did not want to be teased for odd behaviour. 1 square or 2 squares?
"Oh, why, 2, of course. The faster we win, the better,"
Grandma said. I pushed her piece forwards, and she landed on a green square in the forest. As I reached towards the green pile of item cards, I still struggled to shake the feeling that red would be safer. But it had to be tested. I was relieved and slightly amused to read the item card that I had drawn for my grandmother. It depicted a rectangular wrapper branded with the words, "Brands Grove, Oats." "You've earned yourself a chocolate bar," I laughed, handing the item to her. Grandma gleefully took the card, squinting through reading glasses to inspect it for herself. Her strong smile gradually softened into something level, something cold. I'd never seen her that way. A woman who always radiated warmth. But as her sunny disposition departed, a chill swept over my flesh, riddling it with goosebumps. My sister drew a green choice card from the top of the pile and read it quietly. "What does it say?" I croaked.
"You wade through a stodgy puddle, clogged by brittle flakes. It is far deeper than expected. The liquid rises above your frail ankles, threatening to swallow you. Do you jump out and skirt around the pool, moving 1 square backwards? Or do you risk seizing a nearby branch to free yourself, moving 1 square forwards and adding this choice card to your personal supply?" "Oh, I object to the notion that I have frail ankles," Grandma gasped, bending forwards with a wince and scratching the fabric of her left sock. "Oh, I don't know. I'm in no hurry. I'll step out of the puddle."
I nodded,
moving her piece one square backwards. Yeah, seems like the safer option to me. Really? There didn't seem to be any downside to pushing forwards, Michaela said. It said that she'd keep the choice card, I pointed out. I have a hunch that we might be punished for having certain things in our supplies. Who knows what we'll draw later? Oh, the rules didn't mention that, my sister replied. This game has unwritten rules, I thought to myself, shuddering as the darkness of the woods filled my fractured mind. Whatever. Peter's slow, isn't he? Right, it's my turn, Michaela said, eagerly pushing her piece 2 squares along a different route. Makes sense to try another way. And I'll pick up this red item card. Oh wow, a shovel. Maybe you'll dig us out of some dire situation, I suggested, trying to perk up. She grinned. Or I'll hit you over the head with it, if you annoy me. Anyway, let me read this choice card. Okay. You find a bicycle propped against a nearby tree. Do you take it, moving forward an extra 2 squares, or leave it, staying on your present square? Leave it, I said. Michaela rolled her eyes. Ugh, you're no fun. We'll be playing until sunrise at this rate. Look, it seems risky. If you move 2 squares forwards, you'll land on an event space, I said, pointing at the board. So? Why are you assuming that events would be bad? My sister asked, pushing her piece forwards. I take the bicycle, and I guess I'll be picking up a red event card. Here we go! My eyes started to lose focus at the edges, and my throat elongated. I realised that I hadn't breathed in roughly 20 seconds. I'd been watching Michaela with a horrified expression as she silently read the card without revealing her thoughts. What does it say, dear? Grandma asked, smiling in a way that implied she'd forgotten whatever unnerved her. You become distracted by something in the forest, my sister eventually said. You see a lamb, entirely out of place, being circled by wild foxes. The predators viciously tear the helpless creature limb from woolly limb. You are so distracted, in fact, that you miss your following turn. And Peter smiles. After all players have finished this round, he will take 2 steps forwards. I told you, I sighed. Michaela shrugged. It'll be fine. He's still slow. I smiled weakly, struggling to conceal the burgeoning dread in my body. My turn had finally arrived. I scanned the board, unsure as to which route would be the safest. I was starting to suspect that there may be no safe routes, so I followed my sister's lead. I took yet another path, pushing my white figurine 2 squares to the right, heading towards the abandoned town. As I neared Peter's path, a shiver coursed through my form from top to toe, and I was certain that I felt a 4th presence in the room. Certain that I heard breathing in the lounge's empty corner. Haunted, but outwardly composed, I kept playing. Told myself that I'd started hallucinating. Told myself that there may be a leak in the house. I almost excused myself to inspect Grandma's carbon monoxide alarm. I had landed on a red square, which felt safer, though I wasn't entirely sure. I berated myself for fearing a simple game as I picked up a red item. The adrenaline left my body as I read the mundane card. After a few awful seconds of bracing for terror, it was wonderful to feel such a sweet release. It's a torch, I laughed, flashing the card at everyone. A perfectly ordinary item. Nothing that upset me as much as a chocolate bar. Of course, I reminded myself that Grandma wasn't well, and that helped to settle my anxious waters as I reached for a choice card. You find yourself in an empty town, I started, frowning as I wondered how the card coincidentally correlated to the route I had taken. Go on, my sister laughed. You're such a slow reader. Sorry, I said, clearing my throat. You find yourself in an empty town. Excited to have finally reached somewhere, you run forwards. Move an extra 2 squares. Your excitement fades as you realise drapes are drawn, cars are nowhere to be seen, and every inch of the place appears, upon first glance, to be uninhabited. But you enter a small store and find a crying girl, palms digging into her eyes. Sounds like every girl's reaction to you, Emmett. Michaela giggled. Shut up, I said, pushing my piece an extra 2 squares forwards. As you get closer, you realise she is not crying with sadness, but joy. Today is a good day. Her face is nothing but a beaming smile, and she finally removes her hands to ask what you would like. Do you ask the girl to call a taxi for you, missing your turn but moving forwards an extra 5 spaces? Or do you buy some things from the shop, picking up 2 extra item cards? I vote that you call the taxi, Michaela said. What do you think, Grandma? Oh, sorry, Grandma asked, eyes suddenly returning to us. I lost myself for a second. What's happening? Don't worry, Grandma, I said, turning my attention to Michaela. If I call the taxi, I progress 5 spaces to a green square. Ugh, you really think the colours matter, don't you? My sister asked. This is a game of chance, not just strategy. Each coloured pile has good and bad cards. We don't know that, I said, reaching towards the red pile of items. Okay. I choose to buy some things from the shop. I've got a blanket and a tire iron. Great additions to my collection. Weird things for the same shop to sell, but okay, Michaela replied. Right, so we've finished our turns. Round 1 over. Let's move Pete. I half expected the purple figurine to walk of its own accord, striding to the measured rhythm of some tribal tom-toms. However, I heard only the beat of my overworked heart as my sister pushed Peter 2 squares forwards. No drums, and no sign of Robin Williams. Oh, before we continue, I think I should take a trip to the loo, Grandma said, grunting as she braced herself on both armrests of the chair. Oh, I'll take you, Michaela said, abruptly standing and catching the game's empty box with her foot. Careful, I said, as the cardboard flipped. Oh, shoot, Grandma said, as my sister helped her out of the room. We should really think about dinner, shouldn't we? Emmett said he'll get a takeaway for us, Michaela replied. It is late though, you're right. I'll do that now, I distantly said, eyeing the underside of the box. As my grandma slowly exited the room, arm supported by my sister, I closely observed the overturned cardboard. Hastily etched into the back, seemingly with the sharp edge of a blade, was a message. Can't kill it. Don't play it. There was an unsettling urgency to the penmanship, or swordsmanship, of the message's anonymous author. It would be rational to interpret the words as evidence of the previous owner's bizarre sense of humour. Still,
That wasn't what I believed, though you may well be tiring of me saying such things without any notable evidence. I simply wanted to delay telling the story of what happened after I staggered across the driveway, sweat cascading down my temple, and slumped into my car. But I will tell you. I must. Michaela and I, usually without our parents, visited Grandma often. And the nearby village, like so many secluded parts of Wales, had always been a sleepy, idyllic place. A place mostly inhabited by petrels, not people. However, on that game night, a little after dusk, the town's character changed. The sleeping land had perished entirely. Still haunted by what I'd read on the back of the box, it took a few seconds to process the new air in the village. As I followed skeletal roads, I almost forgot why I'd come to the town, but a gurgling stomach reminded me. Whether the pang had been a sign of hunger or fear, I still do not know. What I wanted, more than anything, was to turn around, return to Grandma's house, and scorch the game until all that remained were ashes. Can't kill it. As I pulled into the car park of the local supermarket, I inwardly repeated that sentence. The haunting shapes of those letters were engraved into both the box and my eyes. A deranged scrawl, searing holes into my retinas. I was so afraid that I hardly noticed my surroundings. Which still leaves me thankful. Thankful that I may well have overlooked certain horrors. The ones I did witness were terrible enough. The shop's glass panes released a white glow onto the streets. A glimmer of hope in that dark place. Yet my dread grew as I neared the automatic doorway, and when I entered the supermarket, much to my displeasure, I found nobody. Around 8, on a warm Saturday evening, in the middle of spring, the local store was empty. It's a small town, I reminded myself. What is wrong with you tonight? Get a grip. A sudden vibration struck my side with a hot poker, and I jolted before reaching into my jacket pocket. Often, I barely noticed the sound of my phone. On this night, however, the metallic buzz echoed loudly down the silent aisle. Though, as I rustled around to retrieve my phone, I convinced myself that I had heard a distant door swinging. "Hi, idiot," I answered. "Whoa, why are you so grumpy?" Michaela asked. "Because this town's dead," I replied. "You're only supposed to be grabbing food, not finding a nightclub," my sister said. "Yeah, well, you're slowing me down," I pointed out as I entered the aisle for frozen food. "What do you want?" Grandma took her turn," Michaela said. "And I had to skip mine, remember? So it's you to go. What do you want to do?" I scoffed. "Didn't want to wait for me, huh?" "Just move my piece through the town." "How many squares? I hate to tell you that the next few are all green," she teased. "Better make it 2 squares then," I absently replied, trying to ignore the awful atmosphere in the supermarket. "Right, well, I'll pick up the dreaded green item for you," Michaela said, pausing for a few seconds. "See, why were you worrying? You got a broadsword." I laughed, momentarily forgetting my unease. "What am I gonna do with a broadsword?" Sword stuff?" my sister said. "Broad stuff?" I asked. "Exactly," she replied. "Right, Grumpy, choice card. You pass a red lake at great pace.
moving an extra 2 squares forwards. Ooh. You grimace at the unknown liquid beside you, and hands emerge from the depths. You watch as 2 drowning souls burst through the surface, begging to be rescued. Do you save the rabid fox or the lamb?
That's all it says? I asked, wondering about rewards and punishments.
That's all it says, Michaela answered.
I sighed, eyeing a neat stack of margarita pizzas in the supermarket's freezer. Well, I don't see how it affects the game, but I suppose I should save the lamb? Yeah, I'll save the lamb.
Cool, my sister said. Well, it's your go, Grandma. Hurry up and come home, Emmett. I don't want to call you every time it's your turn.
Am I on speaker? I asked.
No, she uncertainly replied.
How's Grandma? I found myself querying quietly, thinking about the Brands Grove Oats bar.
Oh, Michaela said. Yeah, she's fine.
Does she still seem happy? Not just lucid, I mean, does she look uncomfortable at all?
She's fine, Emmett, my sister promised. She probably just wants some food, eh? Yeah, in fact, she says, "Oh, my stomach is growling rather loudly."
Oh, don't be cheeky, darling.
Oh, Grandma just told me off for being cheeky.
That's karma. See you soon. After the call ended, I picked up 3 pizzas and swiftly returned to reality. The icy reality of a silent supermarket in a silent town. Fear crept back into my bones as I passed a dozen hollow aisles, each scorched by the battering glare of overhead lights. I thought of the way that place had lured me inside. The only light in the dark. However, with nothing to accompany me but blinding lights and the muted hum of refrigerators, I started to long for the safety of the shadows. Started to feel exposed in the well-lit supermarket. And I still hadn't shaken that idea of being eyeballed by something. Then, when I reached the self-checkout registers at the far end of the store, something unexpected met my gaze. A bawling woman, face buried in her hands, wearing a bright red uniform and a name tag with illegible text. I was not relieved to see another human, and that had nothing to do with the shop worker's tears. I'm an empathetic man, but the crying lady sparks no natural human instinct to rush forwards and comfort her. For I sensed she wasn't human. Too frightened to make sudden movement, I feigned ignorance and scanned my pizzas, trying to hide trembling hands. However, I struggled to ignore the woman. I wanted to shoot past her without uttering a word. But I did something foolish. Something that defied my will. Something habitual. "Are you okay?" I weakly asked, clutching my bag tightly. At that moment, standing only a few yards away from her, I realised that she was laughing through the tears. Well, it was something adjacent to laughter. Something so close to an emotion that one might call happiness, but not really an emotion at all. That smile, peeking from beneath her hands, was a warning. And I realised, as much as I wanted to stay calm, that I had to move. I veered to the side of the woman, but she sharply lowered her hands as I passed. I yelled. Above the worker's drooling grin, shadowed by a brow ridge,
There were skin-covered dips that did not house eyes, and a nose that was a misshapen lump, merging with the taut flesh of pale cheeks. Her face is nothing but a beaming smile. The words from that choice card pounded in my head. As I had known on some subconscious level before arriving in the town, there was something wrong with the game. Something that had spilled into reality. The woman started to laugh manically, entire body twitching. Then she pounced. I yelped as her hand swiped at me, catching my wrist. I turned, blood staining my sleeve, and ran through the store.
What would you like?
She hysterically cried, audibly closing the distance between us.
I'll see whether we have it in the back.
My legs ached from overexertion as I burst through the automatic doors, followed by an otherworldly cackle that escaped. I ran to the car, fumbling with my keys, then clumsily opened the door and jumped into the driver's seat. I expected to lift my head and face the inhuman shop worker, sprawled on my bonnet or pressed against the side window. However, the abomination had not left the store. And more eerily than that, the building had plunged into darkness, much like the rest of the town. The dim moon and the soft hue of my car's headlights offered the only illumination in town as I burnt tarmac in an eager exit. It was as I left the village that my eyes caught something in the rearview mirror. A fleeting shape that I viewed as a trick of the mind, like whatever else I had experienced. The dark outline of a man, hundreds of yards behind my car, striding with purpose down the middle of the road. My eyes shot back to the windscreen, and I attempted to control my breathing, but as I followed empty country roads back to Grandma's house, an unwelcome thought entered my mind. The possibility that the three of us may be the only living people left on Earth. Given what I had experienced, that idea did not seem deranged. In fact, I fearfully wondered whether we were still on Earth at all. After I rolled onto the driveway, I sat in the car for a few minutes. Pizzas sitting on the seat beside me, heart sitting on my tongue. I thought of the woman in the supermarket. The lack of facial features other than that horrid mouth. The terrible laugh which tagged me. These are all things that have rational explanations, I told myself. The man in the road. Even the sense of being watched. I picked up the shopping bag, painted my face with a false smile, and opened the car door. For Grandma and Michaela, I had to hold it together. For them, I had to finish the game. I knew, in my gut, that there was no stopping it, as much as I longed for us to run away. But I would do my best to shield them from the horror. "I'm back," I announced as I entered the house. "Finally," my sister called from the living room. "Grandma and I gained some juicy items during our turns. I got pepper spray and a winter coat. She got a rope and a pair of running shoes that let her move 3 squares per turn. She'll reach the house during the next round, and we'll be there in only a few more." I nodded stiffly, sitting down and immediately pushing my piece 2 squares forwards. Grandma was 3 squares away from the house. Michaela and I were both 6 squares away. Fortunately, I landed on a red square and narrowly avoided an event space. I drew an armor card, which promised to protect against 1 negative outcome. Then I faced a choice between moving forwards 1 space, but losing 2 items, or moving back 1 space. The latter would have taken me to the event square, so I chose the former, discarding my torch and blanket.
No! How will we win now?
My sister laughed, pushing Peter forward 1 space.
Right, you to go, Grandma.
She smiled.
Well, I suppose I move to... Oh, I don't know.
No, you've won, Grandma, I said, pushing her piece over the line. With your running shoes, you moved 3 squares to the house. It's just Michaela and me. And I'm going to be braver than you, Emmett, my younger sibling announced, pushing her piece 2 squares forwards.
A green event square. Uh-oh, but I'm only 4 away from victory.
I fearfully held my tongue as Michaela picked up both an item and a choice.
A muddy rag,
she laughed, tossing the item card into her pile, then reading her choice card.
You face the ones you fear, the ones you thought you'd avoid at the week's end, at the island's end. And you realise that time is up. You flee no more. You fight. Do you wield a weapon, moving backwards a space? Or do you take the pain, moving forwards a space? How did it know? The weekend? The island? That sounds way too specific.
My sister started to sweat, face contorting into the same expression of agony I had worn an hour earlier. Just a strange coincidence, I lied, still hoping to shield Michaela. What do you choose?
I don't know, she whispered. I'm not sure I want to keep playing.
No! I harshly interjected, before adopting a gentler tone in response to shocked expressions. Sorry, Look, Grandma's finished. Let's just cross the line, Michaela. What's up with you? My sister interrupted, voice trembling.
You've been weird since we started playing. And now I've drawn this card, I feel weird too. I think it might be time for bed, Grandma blankly said.
We have to keep playing, I explained shakily. Please, Michaela, just tell me what you choose. I suggest you wield a weapon. That sounds safer. Better.
Fine, I wield a weapon,
Michaela whimpered, pushing her piece backwards.
Does that mean I don't have to draw the event card?
I hope so, I said, pushing my piece 2 squares forwards and landing on a red square. My item card is a horse. It adds 3 squares to everyone's speed for the remainder of the game.
So we'll both reach the house in the next round?
My sister asked hopefully, eyes swimming with the same petrified realization that I knew lurked in my own. I nodded, reading my choice card.
You hover near the edge of the forest,
weapon at the ready. But which do you wield? The broadsword or the tire iron? Discard the item you do not wish to keep.
How does it know which items you have? My sister wheezed. These aren't coincidences, Emmett. And you know something. I see it in your eyes. What's happening? Is this some horrible prank that you wanted to play on Grandma and me? Did you set up this game?
You know I didn't, I whispered. You feel it too, don't you? There's something wrong with this game. But we need to finish it.
I'd like to go to bed,
our grandmother absent-mindedly said. 1 second, Grandma, I begged, tossing my tire iron into the discard pile, then pushing Peter 1 square forwards. Final round. Your turn, Michaela.
Look, you're gonna reach the house, okay?
Okay.
My sister hoarsely nodded, pushing her piece 5 squares past the finish line.
Now you?
Now me, I said, pushing my piece 4 squares forwards. We've made it. It's over. The game.
The final event card,
Michaela moaned, slicing into my triumphant cry. My blood turned cold. In an eager race to the finish, desperate to put a lid on that game for good, I'd forgotten one of the rules. If a player reaches the house, item and choice cards do not need to be drawn. However, if all players have crossed the line, draw one final event card to determine your victory or failure. It may be red or green. It's okay, I unconvincingly told my little sister as I picked up the red event card.
What does it say?
She asked, stifling tears. It is time to put your decisions to the test. You have chosen the routes, and now your bodies must match your words. Before anybody else uttered a word, all light vanished. Not only overhead, but outside. It was deeper and darker than that, of course. The world was gone, replaced by one devoid of colour.
Grandma! Michaela!
I screamed into the darkness. There came no reply from either of them. Instead, the creaking of large metallic doors broke both the silence and the blackness, filling my world with light once more. A man and a woman entered the space in which I stood, an impressive factory floor filled with large round containers. It appeared to be some sort of processing plant. A humongous machine, made of high-speed steel and topped with a sharp-edged funnel, rocked on its legs in the centre of the room. The metal beast was grinding oats, fed into the machine by an intersecting assembly line. How I had found myself in that place, I did not know, and my heartbeat only quickened as the man and woman seemingly stared right through me. Though I did not recognise him, I recognised her from old photographs. It was a younger version of Grandma, perhaps only a year or 2 older than me.
You will learn, Annabelle, the man, who seemed a couple of decades older, bellowed violently. He grabbed a clump of my grandmother's hair and dragged her towards the churning machine in the centre of the room. I called to her, rushing forwards, but neither of them heard me. Neither of them saw me, and my hand slipped through wispy, intangible colours as I swiped at the malevolent man, who wore a filthy vest and stained jeans.
"Please, Gerald," my grandma begged, sobbing as the man yanked her towards the running grinder. "I could do it, you know," he whispered, feeding her hair into the funnel, mere inches from the teeth of the grinder. "I could put you in one of my chocolates. It would be easy, and nobody would know. It would be our little secret. For the next few months, I would gradually eat my way through you. Your meat would fill 1,000 bars."
"Gerald!"
Grandma cried as he started to taunt her, lowering his handful of her blonde locks into the open funnel.
"You're not thinking clearly. Let's just go to bed, okay? It's just one of your bad days."
"Every day with you is a bad day," he hissed. "No wife of mine will entertain wild ideas of working in the city. If you were to let others gaze upon you, well, I would do something worse than this, Belle. Something far worse. Better that it end this way, my darling. I will make it quick. In a moment of violent abandon, driven by some primal urge to survive, Grandma transformed from a timid girl into an emboldened fighter. She snatched her husband's lower arm, halting him moments before the first blonde strand was bitten by the frightful metal jaws of the machine. Reflexively, the man's fingers loosened, releasing her hair. Gerald eyed her fearfully, stunned by her sudden countermove. "What the devil are you doing, Annabelle? Unhand my arm, or I will make it slower. Far..." Before the man finished his sentence, the younger version of my grandmother thrust her husband's hand and arm into the grinder's throat. The man's scream nearly perforated my eardrums. I gasped as his entire right arm was devoured by the machine. His wide mouth and eyes filled with a vile shower of blood and chewed meat, spat out of the befuddled oat grinder. Gerald feebly wrestled with the machine as it threatened to tug his body over the top of the funnel. But his pain had not come to an end. Grandma seized his other arm, and she faced little resistance from the wounded monster, while slotting the limp limb into the beast. The man's arms were bound to the grinding teeth of the machine for only a few moments, however, before he fell onto the hard ground. Grandma froze for that final minute, whilst her husband, left with ragged, tattered stumps on his shoulders, bled out. And after he stopped squirming on the factory floor, my grandmother remained still for a further 2 or 3 minutes, as did I. In spite of the horror I had already witnessed that night, the evil man's gruesome end is the image which always comes to the forefront of my mind. My younger grandmother surprised me with another layer of terror. I watched as she heaved the bloody, armless carcass over the edge of the raised assembly line, concealing her husband's body in a deep wave of oats. Gerald's mangled corpse was carried by the flowing stream towards the grinder. It took the man up a slope before finally dumping him into the metallic mouth. Not only what remained of his stumps, but his entire body. A reddish rain, littered with soft clumps, shot upwards as the machine sought to unclog its gullet. With great struggle, however, the grinder managed to process the man, incorporating him into a fresh line of Brandsgrove Oats chocolate bars. I did not see how Grandma covered up her crime, which was truly horrific in spite of its justification, for the room suddenly changed. As if blood had smeared the overhead light bulbs, the factory's white glow turned red, and Annabelle's appearance altered. Her trauma morphed into pure disbelieving horror as she started to age. Started to transition from a young woman into the elderly lady I knew. All in a matter of seconds. And then, with a brutal gust that threw the doors open, Grandma's frail form was hurled into the assembly line of oats. We both screamed as she was carried by the brittle current towards the same fate that her husband had met decades earlier. And as she struggled to stay afloat, I saw in her haunted eyes, regardless of the dementia, that she understood. That she still recognised what she'd done so many years ago. Moreover, she finally saw me. Wherever we were, present or past, she saw me. "Help!" she wailed. "Grandma!" I cried, desperate to save her.
but my eyes were drawn to the open factory doors. A second scream had sounded from outside, and the doorway revealed a forest. The woodland behind Grandma's house. My chest started to rapidly pound as I distinguished two shapes bobbing above the tree line, disturbing leaves as they came closer. Two gargantuan heads, belonging to things that lurched towards a girl in the grass. She lay in a clearing just before the tree line, arms raised to defend herself from the misshapen horrors. Michaela. It suddenly became clear, the choice I had already made in Peter's place. The rabid fox and the lamb. My eyes started to water as my legs, propelled by some force beyond my will, carried me towards the factory doors. Away from my terrified grandmother, who was still being carried by a fearsome flow towards the whirring grinder. Towards my sister, who awaited the two looming creatures of the forest. Creatures taller than the swaying birch trees, with bodies human, yet far from worldly. The factory doors closed behind me. I swiveled around to find not a building, but the field between the forest and Grandma's home. She was gone. I screamed for her, tears staining my face, but Grandma did not answer my call. Instead, plucked from a dark crevice of the field, came a black stallion. One with an eyeless face and skin peeling from its bones. A steed that I did not want to approach. However, when I noticed the holstered sword tied to its reins, and heard another scream from Michaela, I realised I'd already chosen this fate. The horse and the broadsword. I mounted the unholy creature, which came from some world below or parallel to ours. Then, facing the looming terrors, I booted the stirrups and galloped ahead. The vile entities came into view, and I recognised their tattered rags. The navy uniforms from our old high school. Beneath the warped faces, with bleeding eyes and terrified fanged smiles, I sensed something familiar about the monsters.
Emmett!
My sister gasped as I dismounted the horse, clutching the broadsword in a shaky hand. I tried to stop the tears, tried to swing the blade and bring the nightmare to an end. But some invisible, impenetrable obstacle stood in my way. I let a cry slip free as the abomination started to stagger towards me, the insect standing between them and Michaela.
Emmett,
she whimpered.
It said I had to wield it. Remember?
With eerie ease, I found that I dropped the weapon into my sister's arms, and she quickly stumbled to her feet. My head throbbed as I stepped backwards. Beads of sweat trickled down my brow. Then Michaela swung the blade, unleashing a petrified screech. The broadsword tore through the pair of lumbering monstrosities, turning them to ashy mounds of blackness. After that, we stood in silence, caught between the forest and Grandma's distant house. Tears stung my eyes as I recalled what I'd seen in that vision of a factory. I knew she was gone. Knew, despite an evening of untrustworthy visions in a game from another realm, that two things were indisputable. Grandma had died a horrible death, and I had chosen that.
They tormented me at school,
Michaela finally blubbered, dropping the sword to the ground and running into my arms. Then my sister raised her sleeve, revealing healed scars.
the marks of ancient cigarette burns. Not just physically, but... My sister tapped her head, sniffling into my jacket. And none of this is real, is it? It's all that awful game.
Oh, it's real, I interrupted.
Grandma's dead. And I killed her. You chose to save me, Michaela finished, finally understanding. You didn't know. You didn't know what you were choosing.
I know, I whispered. She clutched me tightly.
Have we finished the game, Emma? We all reached the house. We completed the final event.
My sister was interrupted by a sound. A dull ringing. One that replaced all other noise. In my peripheral vision, I saw Michaela's lips continue to move, but I heard only static. A flurry of wasps in my brain, swarming to signal the arrival of something. Something from a place beyond hell. I eyed a dark shape that emerged from the tree line. A silhouette I recognised from earlier in the evening. He was little more than a black outline, but the motion of his form was well communicated. He was strolling with insidious intent. Strolling towards us, or rather, towards the house. My head snapped around to face Grandma's property, hundreds of yards behind us. "Run!" I yelled. My sister lifted her head, eyes not quite meeting the forest, but I know she saw it. She pretended not to see, but I read her face. There were no words from either of us, only a limb-tearing sprint across the field. The horse had abandoned us, so we had to rely on our feet. As a pumping pulse filled my ears, I told myself that we had, by far, outpaced Peter. By the time we reached the house's back gate, I expected him to have hardly made it to the field's midway point. The back door had unlatched again, so I hurried my sister inside and turned to lock the exit. Michaela and I screamed together, both soundlessly. We stood with mouths agape, paralysed. Walking across the paving slabs, having passed through the garden gate without making a sound, was a man whose form remained shrouded by shadows. Inexplicably shrouded. Even in such dim light, some of his features should have been revealed. But he was nothing, not even the colour of his game piece. Peter was a strolling silhouette, moving at a glacial pace, yet having somehow closed the gap between us. I slammed the door shut with a primal cry. Then Michaela and I held each other, quaking in the hallway, as the back porch creaks beneath approaching footsteps. Measured footsteps. Through the distorted window pane, that silhouette came into view. It stood, tall form warped by the glass, and faced the door, eyeing us, if it had eyes. Then, after only a few seconds, he turned and walked away with that same pace. We were left with only a gash on my wrist, and Grandma's disappearance, to prove that any of it had, in fact, happened. Michaela and I told folk that our Grandma had let herself out of the house whilst we slept. It was a symptom of her unwell mind. She was not seen again. and they would not believe the alternative without seeing what we saw. Over the following weeks, we tried to disprove the message on the underside of the box. Michaela and I set the game ablaze, tried to cut it to pieces. Nothing worked. It was impenetrable. I agreed to store it in my dorm room. I don't want to dump it somewhere. Don't want to live with the guilt of passing it on to another unsuspecting soul. Can't kill it. Don't play it. Even after our victory, an it remains in the back of my mind. One day, Peter will have his place.